Have you ever had that sense of tranquility, that feeling of your own little world being just as you like it, only for someone to come along and disrupt it, seemingly without a second thought? It's a question many of us can relate to. That subtle irritation that simmers beneath the surface when a neighbor's inconsiderate actions chip away at your peace. This story begins with just such a scenario. An oddly parked car and a woman named Karen who seemed to carry an air of entitlement wherever she went. But what unfolds from this seemingly minor inconvenience is a tale of patience tested, boundaries defended, and the unexpected consequences of persistent disrespect. Stay with me as we piece together the beginning of this intriguing situation. My name is Marcus, and my life in the quiet southern suburbs of Atlanta was, by all accounts, a peaceful one. I lived in a comfortable, two-story house with a well-tended garden, a place where the loudest sounds were usually the chirping of birds in the morning or the gentle hum of the air conditioning on a hot summer afternoon. I was the only black man on my particular street, a fact I was aware of but one that had never defined my interactions with my neighbors or my sense of belonging. Everyone was generally friendly. We exchanged pleasantries, helped each other out with small favors, and maintained a respectful distance. It was the kind of neighborhood where you felt safe, where you could leave your windows open on a cool night, and where life moved at a comfortable, predictable pace. My days were structured around my work as a freelance graphic designer. I enjoyed the flexibility of working from home, the ability to set my own hours, and to immerse myself in creative projects without the distractions of a traditional office environment. Each morning began with the ritual of grinding fresh coffee beans, the rich aroma filling my kitchen, followed by a quiet moment on my porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky with hues of orange and pink. I found solace in the simple routines of life, watering my plants, reading a book in the afternoon sun, and occasionally chatting with Mrs. Henderson next door about her prize-winning roses. Everything was settled, predictable, and pleasant. That is, until Karen moved into the house directly across the street. From the moment I saw her unloading boxes from a moving truck, there was something about Karen that set my teeth on edge. It wasn't anything specific at first, just a general vibe, an air of self-importance that seemed to radiate from her. She was the kind of person you could tell instinctively was going to be trouble. Her voice, when she spoke to the movers, carried a sharp, almost demanding tone. Her eyes seemed to constantly scan her surroundings with a critical gaze, and the few times I saw her smile in those early days, it never quite reached her eyes, feeling more like a practiced social maneuver than a genuine expression of warmth. And then there was the SUV, a gleaming white behemoth of a vehicle, the kind that seemed designed to announce its owner's arrival with an almost aggressive presence. It was the type of car that people often bought not just for transportation, but as a statement, a way to subtly or not so subtly broadcast their perceived status. It sat in her driveway, always impeccably clean, almost like a trophy on display. The first week she was there, things were relatively uneventful. We exchanged a few cursory greetings, polite but distant. I made a point of welcoming her to the neighborhood, offering my help if she needed anything, a gesture that was met with a curt nod and a brief, "Thanks." I didn't expect to become best friends overnight, but there was a distinct lack of warmth in her interactions that left me feeling slightly uneasy. Then came the first incident with the car. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember distinctly because I had an important client meeting scheduled online. I was just about to back my car out of the driveway when I noticed it. Karen's pristine white SUV was parked directly in front of my garage entrance, completely blocking my way. My initial reaction was one of disbelief. Surely, she hadn't meant to park there. Maybe she was just unloading something quickly? But there was no sign of her. No hazard lights flashing, just the imposing vehicle obstructing my path. I waited for a few minutes, hoping she would appear, but the SUV remained stubbornly in place. I checked my watch. My meeting was starting soon. A wave of annoyance washed over me, quickly followed by a resolve to handle this calmly and directly. I got out of my car and walked across the street to Karen's house. Taking a deep breath, I approached her front door and gently knocked. I could hear faint sounds from inside, the muffled voices of a television program. After a short wait, the door creaked open, and Karen stood there, looking slightly disheveled as if she had just woken up. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my tone friendly and neutral. "I'm Marcus, your neighbor from across the street." She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes?" she replied, the single word carrying a hint of impatience. "I was just wondering if that white SUV parked in front of my driveway is yours?" I asked politely, gesturing towards the street. Her eyebrows shot up, and she gave me a look as if I had just accused her of a heinous crime. "Oh, I just parked there for a minute. The street is wide enough. What's the big deal?" Her voice had that sharp edge I had noticed before, and her tone was dismissive. I forced a polite smile, trying to diffuse the situation. "Well, it's actually blocking my garage entrance, so I can't get my car out. Could you possibly move it, please?" She sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes. "Fine," she said, the word laced with irritation. "I was just running inside to grab something." As she turned to leave, she muttered something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like, "Some people are just so uptight." I watched as she walked to her SUV, got in, and slowly backed it out of the way. As I got back into my own car, a prickle of unease settled in my stomach. Her reaction had been unnecessarily hostile, and her dismissive attitude was concerning. This felt like the beginning of something, and I had a feeling it wasn't going to be pleasant. The calm of my quiet life had just been subtly, but undeniably, disturbed. This was just the first piece of the puzzle, and I had a sinking feeling that the full picture was going to be far more complicated and frustrating than a simple parking mishap. The just for a minute parking became a daily occurrence. It was no longer an occasional inconvenience. It was a deliberate act, a blatant disregard for my property and my peace. There were days when I would return from the grocery store, bags filled with perishable items, only to find Karen's white SUV parked squarely in front of my driveway, forcing me to park down the street and haul everything back. The frustration was immense, a slow burn that simmered beneath the surface of my otherwise calm demeanor. One particularly exasperating afternoon, I had an appointment across town. I had scheduled it carefully to avoid rush hour, and I was running a few minutes early. As I went to pull out of my driveway, there it was again, the white SUV, an unwelcome sentinel blocking my exit. I checked my watch, my anxiety rising with each passing minute. I honked my horn, a short, polite beep, hoping Karen might hear it. Nothing. I honked again, a little louder this time. Still no response. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my meeting time drawing closer, feeling a surge of anger mixed with helplessness. Finally, after about 15 minutes, I saw Karen saunter out of her house, keys jingling in her hand, a phone pressed to her ear. She didn't even glance in my direction as she got into her SUV. I watched, seething, as she started the engine and slowly backed out, completely oblivious to the disruption she had caused. By the time I finally managed to leave, I was already late for my appointment, my carefully planned schedule thrown into disarray. This wasn't just about the inconvenience anymore. It felt personal, a deliberate act of disrespect. I decided I needed to try a different approach. The polite requests hadn't worked. Perhaps a more official approach would be more effective. That evening, I printed out a copy of the HOA's parking regulations, highlighting the section that clearly stated that blocking a neighbor's driveway was prohibited. The next morning, when the white SUV was once again parked in its usual infuriating spot, I walked across the street, the printed regulations in hand. I knocked on Karen's door, trying to maintain a calm and reasonable demeanor. She opened the door, a look of annoyance already etched on her face. "What is it now, Marcus?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Karen," I began, holding up the paper, "I just wanted to show you this. These are the parking regulations for our community. It clearly states that you can't park in front of someone else's driveway." She snatched the paper from my hand, glanced at it dismissively, and then scoffed. "Oh, please, it's just a car. You're making such a big deal out of nothing." "It's not nothing to me, Karen," I replied, my voice starting to show a hint of frustration. "I need to be able to get in and out of my driveway. It's a matter of basic consideration." "Consideration?" she repeated, a mocking tone in her voice. "You're the one being inconsiderate, always complaining about such trivial things." "I just want to live here peacefully, like everyone else," I said, trying to appeal to some sense of neighborly understanding. She just laughed, a short, harsh sound, and then handed the paper back to me. "Get over it, Marcus," she said, and then slammed the door in my face. That was it. I knew then that reasoning with Karen was futile. Her behavior wasn't just thoughtless. It was intentionally disruptive. And it wasn't just the parking. Soon after the driveway incidents escalated, other annoyances began to surface. Loud, thumping music would often emanate from her balcony at all hours, sometimes late into the night, disturbing the quiet of the neighborhood. I would lie in bed, the bass vibrating through my walls, feeling a growing sense of anger and frustration. Then there was the trash. Karen seemed to have a complete disregard for the community's waste disposal rules. Her trash cans would overflow, bags of garbage would be left haphazardly on the curb, sometimes even spilling onto my property. The once pristine appearance of our street was slowly being marred by her inconsiderate behavior. But through it all, the white SUV remained the central symbol of my frustration, a constant reminder of Karen's blatant disregard for common courtesy. It sat there, day after day, a gleaming white challenge parked directly in front of my ability to easily access my own home. I realized that my attempts at polite conversation and even presenting the HOA rules had been completely ineffective. Karen seemed to thrive on the disruption she was causing. I knew I needed to take a different approach, one that was less confrontational in the moment but more impactful in the long run. That's when I started documenting everything. Every time Karen's SUV blocked my driveway, I took a picture, noting the date and time. Every instance of loud music late at night, I made it in my journal. Every time her trash overflowed onto the curb, I added it to my growing collection of evidence. I didn't react with anger or engage in shouting matches. Instead, I quietly and methodically documented everything. I knew that if I was going to resolve this situation, I needed proof, a clear and undeniable record of Karen's disruptive behavior. I wasn't looking for a confrontation. I was looking for a solution, a way to restore the peace and quiet that I had once enjoyed in my own home. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, and I knew that my patience, though tested, would eventually lead to a resolution. The constant irritation was wearing me down, but I was determined to find a way to address Karen's behavior without resorting to her level of negativity. My hope was that the documented evidence would speak for itself and force some kind of change. The week my relatives from Florida came to visit was supposed to be a relaxing and joyful occasion. My cousin, his wife, and their 2 kids arrived on a sunny Saturday afternoon, their car packed with luggage and excitement. We spent the day catching up, laughing, and making plans for their week-long stay. That evening, after a delicious barbecue in my backyard, they decided to head back to their hotel for the night, promising to return the next day for more family time. The next morning, as I waited for them to arrive, I went outside to tidy up the porch. And there it was, like a recurring nightmare made of gleaming white metal. Karen's SUV, parked directly across my driveway, once again obstructing access to my property. My heart sank. Not again. Especially not when I was expecting guests. I checked to see if Karen's car was in her driveway. Perhaps she had a visitor. But no, her driveway was empty. This was a deliberate act, a clear message of defiance. My frustration, which I had been diligently trying to keep in check, finally reached its breaking point. My relatives would be arriving any minute, and there was no way they could park their car. I considered going over to her house again, knocking on her door, and pleading with her to move her vehicle. But the memory of our previous interactions, her dismissive attitude and outright hostility, made me hesitate. It would likely be a futile effort, and I didn't want to start the day with an argument, especially with my family visiting. This time, I didn't even bother. I went back inside, grabbed my phone, and dialed the number for the local towing company. I had their number saved from the last time. "Yes, I need a car towed," I said, my voice calm but firm. I gave them my address and described the vehicle, a white SUV blocking my driveway. They informed me that a truck would be there within 15 minutes. I went back outside and waited, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. My relatives arrived just as the tow truck pulled up. They looked confused as the truck driver began hooking up Karen's SUV. "What's going on, Marcus?" my cousin asked, his brow furrowed. "That's Karen's car," I explained, gesturing towards the SUV being lifted onto the flatbed. "She keeps parking in front of my driveway, even after I've asked her not to. I've had enough." We watched in silence as the tow truck drove away with Karen's prized possession. There was a strange sense of justice in the air. Later that day, as expected, Karen returned home to find her SUV missing. Her reaction was exactly what I had anticipated. A volcanic eruption of anger and outrage. I heard her shouting from across the street, the shrill sound carrying easily through the quiet neighborhood. "Who did this?" she screamed, her voice laced with fury. I walked out onto my porch, calmly sipping an iced tea, and looked across the street at her. "I did," I said, my voice even and steady. "You parked your car illegally, blocking my driveway on my property. I warned you multiple times." Her face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. She stomped her foot and continued to yell, threatening to call the police. I simply nodded and told her to go ahead. A few minutes later, a police car arrived. The officers listened to both sides of the story, and after a brief discussion, they sided with me. "Ma'am," one of the officers said to Karen, his tone serious, "you cannot block your neighbor's driveway. The homeowner has the right to have your vehicle towed if it's obstructing their access." Karen was livid, but there was nothing she could do. The police informed her of the location of the impound lot and left. I watched as she stood in her driveway, fuming, the absence of her white SUV a stark reminder of her inconsiderate behavior. 3 days later, I couldn't believe my eyes. There it was again, the gleaming white SUV parked squarely in front of my driveway. It was as if Karen had learned absolutely nothing. Perhaps it was a deliberate act of retaliation, a final act of defiance. Or maybe, just maybe, she was simply that entitled and oblivious. This time, I didn't hesitate. I called the towing company again. As I waited for them to arrive, I pulled out my phone, opened my social media app, and started a live stream. I propped my phone up on a tripod, ensuring it had a clear view of Karen's SUV and my driveway. When the tow truck arrived, I narrated the situation calmly and factually for the viewers of my live stream. "Here we go again," I said into the camera, my voice steady. "My neighbor, Karen, has once again decided to park her vehicle across my driveway, completely blocking me in. This is after multiple warnings and even having her car towed just a few days ago. As the tow truck driver hooked up Karen's SUV, I continued to explain the situation, showing the clear obstruction and reiterating the previous incidents. The comments started pouring in, a mix of disbelief, support, and outrage directed at Karen's blatant disregard for common courtesy. The tow truck drove away, and I ended the live stream with a simple message. Sometimes, you have to take matters into your own hands when people refuse to respect your boundaries. I added a caption to the video. When you give someone multiple polite warnings and they think you won't actually do anything, the video went viral within our neighborhood. Screenshots and links were shared across community groups and email chains. The HOA board became aware of the situation, and they were not pleased with Karen's repeated violations. A week later, Karen received an official warning from the HOA, citing multiple violations of the community's parking regulations and other nuisance complaints. She attempted to file a countercomplaint against me, but the documented evidence I had meticulously collected, the photos, the videos, the journal entries, proved to be irrefutable. Her attempt to sue me went nowhere. The atmosphere in the neighborhood had shifted. People who had previously been hesitant to speak out about Karen's behavior now felt emboldened. There were whispers and knowing glances whenever she was seen. The white SUV, once a symbol of her perceived status, had become a mark of her notoriety. About a month after the second towing incident, Karen's house went up for sale. A few weeks later, a moving truck arrived, and Karen was gone. Just like that. No farewells, no explanations. No one in the neighborhood seemed particularly surprised or upset by her departure. A collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through our quiet streets. Looking back on the whole ordeal, I realized that my initial desire for a peaceful life hadn't been naive. It was a reasonable expectation. I don't enjoy conflict, and I always try to approach situations with kindness and understanding. But I also learned that kindness doesn't mean allowing others to walk all over you. Sometimes standing up for yourself, even in seemingly small matters, is essential. You don't always need to raise your voice to be heard. Sometimes patience, persistence, and choosing the right course of action at the right time can be far more effective. The truth, in the end, has a way of making itself heard, just like the rumble of that tow truck on the hot Atlanta asphalt. Kindness isn't a doormat for others to wipe their feet on. It's the strength to remain kind, even when you have to stand your ground and push back. And sometimes that pushback comes in the form of a tow truck and a viral video. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more engaging narratives. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And now, why not check out another video on our channel? You might find your next favorite story waiting for you.